The demise of Herod Agrippa I was an event that left the ancient world in shock and continues to astound us today. He was literally consumed by worms while still alive. This incident, documented in both the Bible and historical texts from that era, illustrates the severe repercussions of unbridled arrogance. Consider those tales of individuals who are born into tremendous wealth and privilege. Herod Agrippa was one such figure, coming into the world in 3 BC as the grandson of Herod the Great, the very monarch who sought to eliminate baby Jesus. His lineage belonged to what was known as Roman client royalty, a status where they governed yet remained subservient to the Roman Empire. Agrippa spent his childhood in Rome, where he received an exemplary education among Rome's elite, including the future Emperor Claudius. Picture a young boy growing up amidst some of the era's most influential figures. Agrippa stood out for his political savvy, a trait not commonly seen among his contemporaries. He possessed a unique ability to curry favor with both Roman and Jewish leaders, a skill both rare and beneficial. To the Romans, he was a dependable ally and an adept official. To the Jews, he portrayed himself as a pious adherent to the laws of Moses, honoring Jewish traditions and customs. In Jerusalem, his popularity soared. For the first time in years, the Jews had a ruler who genuinely seemed invested in their cultural practices. He actively participated in temple festivities, contributed generously, and adhered strictly to religious laws. This endeared him to both the religious leaders and the general populace, significantly boosting his stature and influence. Yet here lies the great irony of his tale. As his authority expanded, so did his arrogance. This escalating pride set the stage for his dramatic demise. Agrippa began to view himself not merely as a monarch, but nearly as a deity. And what lesson do we draw from the Bible on this? It warns, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. His dominion over life and death began to cloud his judgment. It was during this period that he started to persecute the followers of Jesus, not out of religious zeal but as a political maneuver. He recognized that suppressing Christians garnered favor with powerful factions, and he pursued this path without wavering. Agrippa's ascension to complete control over Judea was swift and remarkable. In a short span, he had consolidated a realm nearly as expansive as that of his grandfather, Herod the Great. He fortified Jerusalem, endorsed public spectacles and festivals, and cemented his status as a pivotal figure in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's fascinating to see how power can transform a person, isn't it? If you're enjoying this riveting story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more historical content. Moreover, what is less known is Agrippa's knack for forging key alliances. He maintained close relations with both Roman emperors and Jewish authorities, a significant achievement in such volatile times. However, this success came with its costs, which were soon to be dramatically paid. Power and success have a unique way of unmasking our true selves. For Herod Agrippa, they exposed a man who would stop at nothing to preserve his political influence. This marked the beginning of a particularly grim era for the early church in Jerusalem. It all unfolded when Agrippa saw an opportunity to enhance his standing among Jewish leaders by going after the burgeoning group of Jesus' followers. According to the Bible, in Acts 12:1, it notes that during this time, King Herod actively persecuted members of the church. His motives were not personal, they were entirely strategic. The persecution's first casualty was James, the brother of John. James was not only one of Jesus' closest apostles, but also one of the 3 present with him during the Transfiguration. Agrippa commanded that James be put to death by the sword, making him the first apostle to be martyred. His execution was met with celebration among those opposed to Christianity, a reaction Agrippa had anticipated and desired. Encouraged by the approval from the Jewish leaders, Agrippa set his sights even higher. His next target was Peter, the recognized leader of the Christian community in Jerusalem. Peter was arrested during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, a pivotal time in the Jewish religious calendar. He was heavily guarded by 16 soldiers, divided into 4 shifts of 4 each. However, during this dire time, the unexpected occurred. As the church fervently prayed for Peter's release, an angel of the Lord miraculously appeared in his cell one night. The chains binding Peter fell away, and he was astonishingly liberated from his imprisonment. When Agrippa learned of the escape, his anger was immense, leading him to order the execution of the guards. This incident reveals a profound aspect of divine intervention. While God permitted James to be martyred, he intervened to save Peter in a miraculous escape. These acts are part of the mysterious ways of divine plans, which may not always be clear to us, but are meant to serve a higher purpose. However, the persecution did not cease with this event. Agrippa intensified his efforts against the followers of Jesus throughout Jerusalem. Families were disrupted, properties were confiscated, and many believers were forced to flee the city. Yet, true to the resilient spirit of Christianity, this persecution paradoxically helped spread the faith further. As believers scattered, they carried the gospel message to new cities and regions, unwittingly fulfilling Jesus' directive to disseminate the gospel far and wide. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, Agrippa's actions were inadvertently undermining his own position. As his pride and self-perception as more than a mere mortal grew, so too did the public's perception of his changing demeanor. The man once admired for his political acumen and diplomacy began demanding divine honors, oblivious to the repercussions. His increasing arrogance was blinding him to the impending consequences. These developments were preparing the ground for a dramatic climax, a lesson in the perils of hubris and the necessity for humility before God. Agrippa's tale is a stark reminder of the dangers of opposing God's will. As stated in Acts 5:39, "If it is of God, you cannot overthrow them, lest you be found to fight against God." This warning was about to manifest dramatically in Agrippa's life, illustrating the fatal cost of his actions. The events in Caesarea would mark a pivotal moment in the life of Herod Agrippa III. On what seemed like a typical day, he chose to hold a grand public event against a backdrop of escalating tensions between him and the cities of Tyre and Sidon. These cities were heavily reliant on Agrippa's territories for their food supply. In a strategic move, Agrippa had severed ties with them, likely due to a dispute fueled by his ego or desire for control, although the specifics aren't detailed in the Bible. In their desperation, the representatives from Tyre and Sidon turned to Blasto, the king's cupbearer and trusted aide, hoping he could secure them a meeting with Agrippa. Their cities were in dire straits without access to essential supplies, and they were eager to reconcile. Seizing the opportunity to demonstrate his power, Agrippa arranged for a dramatic entrance during the second day of the celebrations. He donned his most extravagant royal attire for the occasion. Historical accounts, including those by Josephus, recount that he wore a robe made entirely of silver, which glistened brilliantly in the morning sunlight. As he stepped up to deliver his speech, a transformative event occurred. The sunlight glinted off his silver garments, casting a brilliant glow. The crowd erupted, exclaiming, "This is the voice of a god, not a man." Such praise fed directly into his vanity. At that pivotal moment, Agrippa faced a decision. He could denounce the adoration and honor God, as any Jewish ruler ought to, especially given the stern warning of the first commandment against idolatry. However, he made the opposite choice. He embraced the adulation. He basked in the acclaim, reveling in it as though he were indeed divine. It was then that his fate was sealed. According to the Bible, an angel of the Lord immediately struck him because he failed to glorify God. The aftermath was so startling that it was documented not only in the scriptures, but also in secular historical accounts. Josephus, a renowned Jewish historian, recounts a horrifying detail. Agrippa was suddenly afflicted with severe abdominal pain, so agonizing that he had to be carried out of the amphitheater. Those who had just moments before extolled him as a deity now witnessed his excruciating distress. Remarkably, his suffering was prolonged and humiliating. Over the next 5 days, Agrippa endured unbearable pain as worms consumed him alive. The man who had permitted himself to be exalted as a deity was subjected to one of the most degrading deaths in recorded history. This incident in Caesarea is a stern warning. The very king who oppressed Christians and deemed himself superior to all ultimately met a dire end due to his arrogance. Echoing the wisdom of the book of Proverbs, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Herod Agrippa's demise serves as a profound lesson on the dangers of hubris, marking a significant point in history where pride led to the downfall of a mighty ruler. Let's delve into the harrowing details of his final hours. Envision the scene. The king, just after being resplendent in his silver attire, now collapses in agony. The royal physicians, esteemed as the finest of their era, were utterly confounded. They faced a condition they had never encountered. It seemed as though something was literally devouring the king from within. Ancient texts describe Agrippa's ailment as a vermicular affliction, a horrific infestation of worms that began consuming his internal organs while he was yet breathing. The stench was so foul that it was nearly unbearable to remain in his presence. Even his most loyal servants struggled to tend to him, forced to rotate frequently due to the overwhelming odor. This gruesome end is not unique in the annals of biblical history. It echoes the fates of others who dared to assume divine status. Consider King Nebuchadnezzar, who also elevated himself above his station and suffered, living as a beast for 7 years. Unlike Agrippa, however, Nebuchadnezzar found redemption through repentance and was ultimately restored. This stark contrast highlights a pivotal theme: the perilous consequences of pride and the redemptive power of humility. The physicians of the era exhausted all known remedies, applying ointments, employing medicinal herbs, and conducting healing rituals, yet nothing availed. It seemed as though a divine force was intent on demonstrating that no earthly power could alter this course. Agrippa's death was destined to serve as a cautionary tale for all who would hear of it. In the city, the shift in public sentiment was swift and stark. Those who had recently proclaimed him a god were now whispering about how this god was succumbing to worms. The irony was unmistakable. As stated in Psalm 75 verse 5, God is the judge, he puts down one and lifts up another. The Christians who had endured his persecution interpreted this event as a manifestation of divine justice, not as a mere act of vengeance. This episode imparted a profound lesson to the early church. God does not require humans to defend his honor, for he is fully capable of asserting it himself. The agony Agrippa endured was so severe that his screams echoed through the palace corridors, forcing even his own children to stay away. The man who had once portrayed himself as an untouchable divine figure was now reduced to a condition pitied by even his fiercest adversaries. In his dying moments, historical records suggest that Agrippa came to realize the enormity of his error. Perhaps he recalled the words of the prophet Isaiah, "All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field." All his power, influence, and achievements, suddenly they seemed inconsequential. This stark realization highlighted how swiftly a single moment of arrogance could alter one's fate. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the enigmatic ailment that claimed King Herod Agrippa III. The fifth day marked the peak of his suffering. The worms had proliferated to such an extent that they were consuming his body from within. His torment finally ceased when his heart stopped beating. Herod Agrippa I, once venerated as a deity, met a demise steeped in humiliation, a defining moment in the annals of the early church. This ruler, notorious for initiating one of the harshest persecutions against Christians, met an end that was as unexpected as it was severe. As the scripture in Galatians 6:7 warns, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever one sows, that will he also reap." The affliction that overtook Herod Agrippa is historically known as worm disease. Contemporary historians and medical experts consider it might have been an advanced case of intestinal parasitosis, perhaps exacerbated by other health complications. The symptoms, as documented by the historian Josephus, included severe abdominal pain, an unbearable odor, and the disturbing sight of worms. This condition's historical recurrence, often among tyrannical leaders or those who claimed divinity, adds a layer of intrigue. The Bible itself reflects on this in Acts 12:23, stating, "Immediately, because Herod did not give God the glory, an angel of the Lord struck him down, and he was eaten by worms and died," underscoring a potent biblical lesson about the divine retribution that awaits those who exalt themselves as gods. Herod Agrippa's tragic end serves as a profound reminder of the perils of pride, as echoed in Proverbs 16:18. "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." His story is one of the most vivid examples in the New Testament of the dire consequences that can follow unchecked arrogance. This narrative illustrates the biblical principle that while God resists the proud, he extends grace to the humble. As Agrippa persecuted the church and indulged in being worshipped as a deity, God was setting the stage for a judgment that would resonate through the ages as a stark admonition. Agrippa's case is not unique in the scriptures. Another prominent example is Nebuchadnezzar from Daniel 4, who also regarded himself as divine, but was given the opportunity to repent after experiencing life as a beast for 7 years. Similarly, the Old Testament recounts the story of Pharaoh in the Exodus, who maintained his pride to his own peril and ultimate ruin. King Uzziah, as described in 2 Chronicles 26, suffered leprosy for overstepping his bounds by attempting to perform priestly duties driven by his own pride. These stories underscore a timeless truth, reiterated in James 4:6. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Agrippa's demise, therefore, not only marks a historical lesson, but also a moral one, warning us of the dangers inherent in pride and self-exaltation. Today, Herod Agrippa's story continues to serve as a powerful warning. Although we may not encounter people who literally declare themselves gods, the peril of pride is ever present, manifesting subtly on social media, in the workplace, and within our personal relationships. The allure of self-exaltation is an ongoing challenge, yet Jesus presents an alternative in Matthew 23:12. "Whoever exalts themselves will be humbled, and whoever humbles themselves will be exalted." This teaching urges us to embrace humility daily, acknowledging that all achievements and talents are gifts from God. True humility is not a sign of weakness, but a mark of wisdom. As followers of Christ, we are invited to emulate his example. Despite being divine, Jesus chose to walk in humility, taking on the role of a servant as described in Philippians 2:7. The dramatic fall of Herod Agrippa I underscores a timeless truth and leaves a legacy that echoes through the centuries. His narrative is more than a historical account. It stands as a vivid demonstration of God's response to human arrogance, as reiterated in 1 Peter 5:5. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. When we visit the ruins of Caesarea, where Agrippa's final moments unfolded, we are reminded of how his powerful reign was brought to a humble end. The very amphitheater where he made his last speech remains, acting as a mute witness to his downfall. We've now concluded this remarkable tale. If this video has touched your life, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to stay updated. Share this video to spread this incredible story far and wide. Join me next time for more enlightening biblical narratives. Remember, Herod Agrippa's life reminds us that in the end, all glory is due solely to God.